Let's wait for, okay. So Parshas Boy, let me begin firstly by saying, as we sent out the message, we have dedicated the shir this evening, Leilui Nishmas Rabbi Yitzchak ben Avram, Ivor Smith. I know that many of us, many people here knew him very well personally, and we're especially thinking tonight of his daughter Yael, who's a member of our Kehillah. Ivor was a man who was renowned for his love of Torah, for learning, and for his supporting of Torah, which and for that reason, I think it is incredibly appropriate that we dedicate this year tonight, Leilui Nishmosei, and our thoughts are very much with the family who should have an achama and no further sorrow. So we begin, at the beginning of the parsha, what we notice immediately is that there is a new element introduced. And the reason why that's surprising is because clearly we are in the middle of the story. We're in the middle of the Makkas. It's not just the fact that we're in the middle of the story. You know, we have the 7 in last week's parsha, and we have the last 3 in this week's parsha. So you would not expect, we're already used to, by the time you get to the beginning of Parshas Boy, you're already used to the routine. You're used to the setup of the Makkas. You're used to the warnings. You're used to the way it's carried out. And yet, at the beginning of the parsha, we have the introduction of an entirely new element. And what is that element? I've hardened his heart to place my signs within him. Now, so far, so good. So far, we've seen with the other Makkas as well. Pasuk base. Uluman, second reason. And in order to saper, you shall tell. You shall tell your children and your grandchildren, how I, literally it means, it's almost like a mocking, if you like. It is the way I made fun of Mitzrayim. Then there are signs that I place within them. So this element is new in the sense that it is as far as I can tell, it's certainly the first time within the Makkas, it seems, that this element of Sipur is introduced in this way to tell the story to your children, to your grandchildren. And we, of course, need to therefore understand why that is. What is it at this point in the story that it is introduced? And also, of course, the fact that if there's one thing that frames the whole of this parsha, it is that element. It is that element of telling the story. Absolutely clear. So you look in Perek, we're familiar with this, Perek Yud Beis, Posuk Chavov, and you have the instruction to when your children ask you, what is this avodah for you? You shall say it's Zevach Pesach. You have, of course, the mitzvah of V'higadu Tolevincha at the end of the parsha, the mitzvah to tell the story to our children. So this is if you like, the idea, the concept of the transmission to future generations frames Parshas Boy. So we'll return later to the question of why specifically it is introduced here and what is the connection with the 8th Makkah, the Makkah of Arba. But first, let's try and understand something which I think is fundamental to understanding this parsha, and particularly understanding what it means and what the essence of this idea of transmission to the future generations is. And it begins with a very simple question, which I'm sure you've all asked yourselves before, and if you haven't, then it's the type of question that your kids might throw at you on Seder night, right? Almost every element of Yetzias Mitzrayim, what we call Pesach Mitzrayim, is replicated in Pesach Toras, right? We have the two, we're familiar with the two. Pesach Mitzrayim, the Pesach of the night of Leil HaSeder, the first Leil HaSeder, the first Seder night in Mitzrayim, and Pesach Toras, and the Pesach of future generations, which recreates that event. There is one element, one central major element. There are some other differences as well, but there is one major element that's missing. One element which should be there by any measure, and yet was only that year. And that, of course, is the blood, the dam al mashko from the shtei mezuzos. That element, the element of placing the blood on the lintel, on the doorposts, is the part of the story that you would absolutely expect to be there and to have been implemented in future generations, obviously accompanying Pesach, the Korban Pesach. Look at Ibn Ezra. If any of you are following in a Mikras Gedolos, you'll be able to find this. It's on Perek Yud Beis Posuk Chov Daled. Perek Yud Beis Posuk Chov Daled. The Ibn Ezra makes the question even starker. He says like this. the Ibn Ezra says, Rabbi Choshvu, many people think, that it was a straightforward obligation that applied to future generations. Because the words "this thing," was the next pasuk. The first pasuk of Gimel says Hashem will pass to smite Mitzrayim, and he will see the blood. And he will jump over the entrance, and that will prevent him allowing the destroyer to enter your homes. The next pasuk is Ushmartem es hadovar hazeh. You shall guard this matter. He says, obviously, you read the psukim. What is it going on? The next pasuk says, make sure you do this for future generations. So the Ibn Ezra says, many people believe that, of course, that must be the element that is there for future generations. That's where the word, the pasuk goes on. Vodin, he says, and furthermore, that he skipped over the houses of the Bnei Yisrael. But logically, it would make sense, because it's more than just read the psukim. It looks like this should be a key element of having to put the blood on the doorposts, should be an element of future generations. Even more than that, the very name, Pesach. What is Pesach, right? There's a whole debate in the Rishonim, discussion, what exactly the word means. Rashi, simple explanation, the idea of, Rashi says, it either means to have pity, or others say it means vidilek, to skip over the houses. The idea of the blood on the doorposts is central to the very name of the Yom Tov, the very name Pesach. He says that should be the logical argument, but he says, Lule, if not for Kabbalah so emes hanigmeres. We know the truth, he says. The truth is that our tradition is that that's not the case. The Masorah is that this only applied to Pesach, Mitzrayim, and it never applied in future generations. And then he explains why that is. He says you have to say that the word Hadovar Hazeh, this matter, goes back on the shechting of the Korban Pesach, right? So when the Pasuk says, you shall guard this matter and for your children, right? That doesn't refer to the blood on the doorpost, it refers to the Korban Pesach, the bit that comes a few Pasukim before. But obviously, we are left trying to understand and work out what this means and why this is. Now, to understand it properly, we need to take a step back and think about what exactly the mitzvah is of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. What does it mean that we have to tell the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Exodus? And we are familiar with the fact that the mitzvah of Sipur, that mitzvah of telling the story, is closely bound up with the mitzvahs, all the mitzvahs of Seder night. They are really intrinsically linked. And there's lots of different proofs of this. We've heard many of them over many Pesachs gone by. We don't need to repeat them all. One interesting one, though, I will just say, is there's a Tshuvas HaRosh, and the Rosh says, this is the reason why there's no bracha on, the famous question is no bracha on Magid, there's no bracha on the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why? Because he says the bracha is the eating of the matzah. It's like that serves as the bracha itself. They provide the context, the meaning for the telling the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. They are so bound up in that way that it's almost like that serves as the bracha for the story. And this, of course, is reflected in the straightforward reading of the Psukim as well. When your child says to you, what is this matter for you? When you come into the land, etc., your children say to you, what is this for you? And then you say, Zevach Pesach ul Hashem. In other words, the visual experience that they see of the recreating of Pesach Mitzrayim clearly prompts the question, as we're familiar with, which prompts the response of how we tell the story. So therefore, the key purpose of the mitzvah of this, the mitzvahs of the Seder, is to bring life to what happened. It is to bring life to what transpired and to tell the story in the most effective and meaningful way possible that will enable the next generation to carry the story forward. And with that in mind, let's think for a moment. What was the blood on the mashkof and the two doorposts for? It's a very strange thing. What was it for? What was the purpose? We read the psukim and you struggle. At the end of the day, what we're saying that Hashem needed the blood on the doorpost to know who the houses belong to? Clearly not. Let's look at Rashi. Perek Yud Beis, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Says Rashi, V'hoya hadom lochem la'os. The pasuk says the blood shall be for you as a sign. Says Rashi, lochem la'os v'lo la'acherim la'os. It's for you as a sign, but it's not for others. Mikan shlo nosno adam elo mibifnim. The blood was on the inside of the doorpost. It wasn't on the outside. No one else could see the blood. Carries on Rashi, v'ro'isi es adom, and I saw the blood. I will see the blood. Hakol golui lefonov. Everything is revealed in front of him. Elam HaKadosh Baruch Hu, rather Hashem says, no sein ani es einai liros shatem asukim mitzvosai posechani aleichem. Hashem doesn't need to see the dam. He knows everything. He knows where the blood is. Everything is revealed before him. Rather, what it means is, what does it mean? I will see the dam. It means that I will place my eyes, I will think and reflect on the fact that you are involved in my mitzvahs, and therefore, posechani aleichem. That is why I will skip your houses, because you have the mitzvahs that you are performing. In other words, the blood on the doorposts, above all, represents the zechus of the dam that served in merit, in Klal Yisrael's merit. And we know what that is, right? That is v'oem aloch b'domai chayi. Yeah, b'domai chayi, the twice dam, the dam Pesach and dam Milah. V'o'er v'o'alaych, as we say in the Haggadah, v'everach orech misposeses b'domayach, psukim in Yechezkel, I saw you wallowing in your blood, right? You va'at eram ve'era, you had nothing, you had garnished, you had no mitzvahs, you had fallen so far, and I gave you two mitzvahs. B'domayach chayi, I gave you the dam Pesach and dam Milah. So what the blood represents, what the blood specifically on the mashkof and the mezuzos represent, because that is the zechus, that is what Hashem sees when it says he sees the dam. It means he sees those mitzvahs, represents the ability of the Bnei Yisrael to lift themselves up through these mitzvahs, to go from the worst possible place, the diyuta hatachtona as it's known, the lowest rung, right? And rise above, and rise so high that they can merit redemption from Egypt. And actually, if you look at the Pesukim carefully, you see and feel the emotion of this moment, specifically in this aspect of the mitzvahs of that night. There is an incredible, incredible observation of the Kli Yakar. Again, if you're following inside Perek Yud Beis, Posuk Zion, he has a marvelous, marvelous insight, which, unless you, I think, have seen the Kli Yakar, I just don't think one would notice it. He says Moshe doesn't do what Hashem asked him to do. What does Hashem say? In Posuk of Beis, Hashem says, "V'higatem el hamashkov vel shtei hamezuzos." You shall put the blood on the lintel, right, and on the two doorposts. What does Moshe say to the Bnei Yisrael? Posuk Zion, Perek Beis Zion, "V'lochu min adom v'nosnu al shtei hamezuzos." Right? Sorry. The other way around. This posuk, he's going on the posuk, the first posuk. Hashem says, "V'nosnu al shtei hamezuzos v'al hamashkov." Hashem says, place the blood on the two doorposts and on the mashkov. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do in posuk Chov Beis? He changes the order. V'higatem, he tells them, when he goes back and tells in posuk Chov Beis, he goes back and he tells the Bnei Yisrael what to do. And he says to them, you shall take agudas ezov, l'kachtem agudas ezov, utvaldem, and you shall dip it b'adom asher basaf, and you shall put it on the mashkof and on the two doorposts. He changes the order. First, Hashem says, put it on the mezuzahs first, the doorpost first, and then the lintel. And Moshe tells the Bnei Yisrael, put it on the mashkof and only then place it on the two doorposts. What is going on? How can he change the order? Says the Kli Yakar in a beautiful, beautiful insight. He says, Val derech hamedrash. This is on Posuk Zion. Nochal Loma, we can say as follows: Ki omru shakodesh baruch hu amel Yisrael. Hashem said to the Jewish people, Shuvu ilai techila. You return to me first. Va'achar kach oshuva aleichem. And after that, I'll return to you. First, you take the first steps. O Knesset Yisrael meshiva. But the Jewish people respond, Ein bi koach lo shuv techila. I can't return first. I can't take the first steps. I don't have the strength. I've fallen too far. I need your help, Hashem. Elo atoti hamaschil. You be the one who begins. Shneimah, as the Pasuk says, Hashivenu Hashem elecha. Return us, Hashem, to you. Va'achar kach, and after that, v'noshuva. After that, v'noshuva, we will return. First, you bring us back. Says the Kli Yakar beautifully. V'alderech zeh yefurash hamashkof. He says, what is the lintel, the mashkof? That's klapi Hashem yisparach elin al kol. Hashem is above all, as the lintel is above the door frame. And the two mezuzos, what are they? They are the zechus, the doorposts that hold up the lintel. They are the avos and the imahos, right? The mothers and the fathers of Klal Yisrael, the Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Sorif, Rachel, and Leah. They're holding up. They want to hold up the door frame. And he brings a proof from it from Psukim. So Hashem says, firstly, when Hashem gives the mitzvah, he says, put it on the two doorposts. And then on the mashkov. As if to say to the Bnei Yisrael, you can do it yourselves. You can do it yourselves. You can rely on the zechus of your ancestors alone. Moshe says, when he turns around to make sure, he says, put it on the lintel first because we can't do it without Hashem. Hashem says, Shuva Elai, you return to me, Shuva Aleichem, I return to you. Moshe says, we rely on Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'Noshuva. You return us to you, Hashem, and then we'll be able to come back. So you feel in those words the intensity of the emotion of this act, the symbolism that it held for the Bnei Yisrael. It is as if they are clinging on to those straws, those few zechusim, those merits that they have. And they're turning around to Hashem and they're saying, we need you. We can't do this alone. We have to put it on the mashko first. Incredible, incredible insight. That's the dilemma over the whole tshuva process, right? If you think about the notion of turning a corner, you think about the notion of raising ourselves in life, right? What is the difficulty? That is the central dilemma. Can we take the first step alone, right? Or do we need someone to push us? Do we need Hashem to push us first? Hashivenu Hashem Elecha? Or are we able to say, are we able to do Shuva Elai, first you return to me? This is the dilemma. This is the challenge of tshuva. So listen to this. This is what I think, therefore, that we can understand what it is, what is going on here, and why this part of the mitzvah could only be in the form of sipur alone, not action, not action. So Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, in his who I was able to learn in his kollel, his son's kollel in Yerushalayim, was an incredible tzaddik, Zichrono Livracha. He was a man who was able to unite so many different elements of Klal Yisrael. As Sephardi chief rabbi, he had tremendous gift for a warmth towards Jews of all description. He observes the fact, this question that we brought earlier, the Ibn Ezra and others ask about the fact that it is not, why doesn't it form part of the Pesach of future generations? And he says that from the Pasuk alone, he says, you can understand and translate the words as if they are telling us it is only going to be the telling of the story. This element will only be telling the story without the action. Ushmartem es hadovar hazeh. You shall guard this dovar, he says, miloshen dibur, like from speaking. Dovar can be understood as speech. In other words, protect and guard this aspect of the nisim for our children, of the miracles for our children. This aspect, this has to be just through telling them how it was and transmitted just in that manner. And effectively, what we're saying to our children with this is we're saying, he says, look at the message. Look how low we were. Look how bad things had become. Yet we raised ourselves up. We never gave up. The doors of tshuva were never, ever closed. And the inspiration in that is, in this whole idea of the dam and the mashkov, is to say, and the mezuzos, is to say, never give up, never give up. Even if we feel in life like we are Erim ve'erio, that we have nothing, we're so low, we've fallen so far, never ever give up, because the doors of tshuva are never closed. A person can always bring themselves out of their situation and improve themselves in life, always grow. And therefore, I think the answer may be like this. If we would put the dam on the mashkov, if we would do that every Seder, what would we be saying to our children? If we would put it on the mezuzahs and the mashkov, we would do it in practice. We'd be saying to our children, everything is there for you on a plate. You don't need to work at this. You don't need to work through your own efforts. It's there for you. Just like on Seder night, we put the dam, it's already there. Look, bang, it's there on the mezuzahs and the mashkov. Of all the mitzvahs of Seder night, each one represents something else, a different aspect of Yetzias Mitzrayim. The matzah represents they left b'chipazon in haste. The maror is the bitterness of the night. But the dam, the blood, according to this, represents their own ability to pull themselves out of that low level, that status, to enable the geula through the mitzvahs of Dam Pesach and Dam Milah. This is the mitzvah that represents the fact that tshuva has to come from within. It has to be, we have to meet Hashem in some way. And that takes effort. That takes hard work. It is always possible, but it's never on a plate. It's never presented to us as if it's already done. Hashem will always see the dam and the mashkof, but we have to stand on the chair and put the blood there. Because if we don't get up on that chair, if we don't take ourselves in life and lift ourselves up, we'll never be able to really grow. We'll never be able to get to that level. And to drive this home, it's a suggestion. It could be that the guarding of this particular mitzvah is only through dibur, it's only through speaking. Because we tell our children, with this particular mitzvah, you need to do this yourself in life. It's the only way. If we, as the parent, would paint our doorposts with blood, we'd be telling you the wrong message. We'd be saying to you, it's okay, we'll do it for you. Don't worry. Everything will be done for you. It'll all be laid out for you. That's a mistake. That's not how we want to be mechanech our children. And therefore, with this particular mitzvah, we just tell the story, because you're going to have to grow yourself in life. You're going to have to get up and do that yourself. And with this, maybe we can suggest, to come back to the first question we started with, why it is that the mitzvah, the element of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, is introduced specifically with the plague of locusts, the Makas Arba. Because as you see, there's another element of Arba that's strange. Okay, and again, it's something which, unless you look carefully, you don't notice it. The very beginning of the parsha. Vayom Hashem al Moshe. Let's turn back to that. Perek Yud Pasuk Aleph. Hashem says to Moshe, "Boil paroi, ki ani achbadati es leboi ves leiva vodov," and then he gives the two lamans, the wonders, and also to tell the story. And then it says, next pasuk, Vayom Moshe Aaron al paroi v'yom elov. He said to him, "Kom Hashem l'kei avrim ad mos miyantel anos mitzvonai shalachim eviav." Don't he send them out? Ki im oein atzal shalach ami. If you don't send them out, you're going to suffer locusts. Where did he know? How do you know? Where do we see anywhere that Hashem says there's going to be a plague of locusts? Right? Doesn't say that. All it says is, right? I've hardened his heart. You're going to have to. There's going to be this incredible wonder coming along, another miracle, and you have to tell the story to your children. And all of a sudden, Moshe walks into Paro's palace and says, "Hey, locusts are coming." Where does he know that? It's a great kasha. The kasha is asked by the Das Zekanim. Again, it's printed in many editions of the Mikras Gedolos. He says, "Moshe Heach Yoda," beginning of the parsha. How did Moshe know? We don't find anywhere that Hashem told him this makkah of Arba. So he brings two answers. First answer, he says that maybe it was because it was engraved on his staff. You know, the Tzach Adash Ba'achav, right? The letters we say on Seder night, yeah, is engraved on the staff of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's how we knew. But there's obviously a question, because if so, yeah, with the other ones as well, right? Why did he have to be told this is what's going to come next? He could have consulted them. He could have consulted the staff. So he's not very happy with that answer, and he gives a different answer, and he says like this: L'chein nirali dehaven Moshe Makkah. Moshe understood the Makkah. Mid'amala Kodesh Baruch Hu leMoshe uleman tesaper. You know where he got it from? He got it from the words leman tesaper, that you shall tell the story. Why? Because the derech hu lesaper makas arba. Because we find elsewhere in Tanakh that a plague of locusts everyone talks about. Everyone tells their kids about a plague of locusts. It says in the pasuk in Yoel, makas arba, the famous, there was a plague of locusts that took place in the time of the Novi Yoel. It says, Oleo livnechem saperu. About it, you shall tell your children, right? That's how, and that is how Moshe Rabbeinu effectively said that that is how Moshe worked out what the Makkah was going to be. Because once he heard Hashem say this idea, Leman tesaper, you shall talk, he thought, 1 second, what do people always talk about? They talk about plagues of locusts. That's what he says. But look at it, think about it a bit deeper for a moment. You see that of all the Makkahs, Arba is the one that Moshe Rabbeinu is able to work out for himself what it is. He doesn't need to be told, he has to work at it. He has to think and reflect and work out, well, 1 second, what is this? Hashem hasn't told me. It hasn't been given to me on a plate as all the others were. I don't know. I have to work it out. It comes from within him. And that is the essence of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, of telling the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and especially V'Higad Tolavincha, we tell our children. If we come out of Leil HaSeder, of Seder night, as passive recipients of information, we've achieved nothing. We haven't gained anything. The aim is to come out with having worked on ourselves, with a mission, a purpose to do it ourselves, to live the best lives we can as Jews, and above all, to build it ourselves, to come out with a perspective that we need to put the dam on the mashko from the mezuzahs, that we can't rely on the fact that our ancestors years ago decided to paint their doorposts with blood. That's not going to help. It's not going to help us grow in life. It's not going to help us grow in our Yiddishkeit. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu, that's why the new element of telling the story, again, it's a suggestion, the element of Yisipru Yetzias Mitzrayim is introduced with Makas Arba. The one where Moshe, it's all bound up together, has to work it out for himself. What it is, he has to work on himself. That's what Sipur is. Work on yourselves. Make sure that you push yourselves to grow in life. The Ramban, at the end of the Parsha, the Ramban says, and this I think ties it all together very, very beautifully. If there's one thing you should learn over this Shabbos, it is the final, if you have the time, it is the final Ramban. Take a look at the final Ramban at the end of the Parsha. There are now excellent English translations as well of the Ramban. The Ramban is probably the most famous one in the Torah. I'm not going to go through all of it now. You can learn. It's worth learning yourselves. The Ramban is the last on the end of it's the end of the Parsha. It is Perek Yud Gimel Posuk Tes Zayin. And it begins about halfway through the main piece where he says, I'll tell you I'll tell you a major theme, a major idea about all the mitzvahs in the Torah. And he goes through and explains effectively how the foundation of Emunah is based on Yetzias Mitzrayim, the foundation of the idea that Hashem directly engages with this world, what we call Hashgacha Pratis. We spoke about that last week. That is the central element of what Yetzias Mitzrayim was there to teach, the idea that Hashem engages in every aspect, every detail. And he explains how all the mitzvahs we do, are there, all the mitzvahs that are associated with Yetzias Mitzrayim are there to really drive home this central point. That's their function, that's what they're there for. And he says, towards the end, Olafichach Omru, that's why they say, he brings a mission in Ovos, in Pirkei Ovos. Be careful about every single mitzvah, a small mitzvah as well as a mitzvah that is perceived to be more significant. Because he says, Shekulon chamuros v'chavivos ma'od. They are all as important as each other. Every moment a person performs the mitzvahs, he thanks Hashem. And he says, that we should believe in our God Hashem, and thank him for creating us. That's why we're here, that's why we were created. He says, we have no other reason for that first creation. That a person should know Hashem and thank Hashem. The kavanos roma masakol b'tfilas. Why we raise our voice in davening, he says. Why do we have kavana in shul? The whole idea of a shul, botzik and isiros, was chus tfilas rabbim, and the merit of the tefillah of the rabbim, the merit of people coming together in tefillah. They should have a place to gather to thank Hashem, and publicize this. The Yomru lefonov, and say in front of him, we are your creations. What the Ramban is trying to say here is that Yetzias Mitzrayim builds Emunah. That's what it does. That's the function. The function of the whole story of leaving Egypt is to build Emunah. We know that. But it also builds the right attitude to mitzvahs in general. It allows us to approach our observance of mitzvahs and to teach what mitzvahs are supposed to do, to teach our children what mitzvahs are supposed to do, in the sense that we teach them the mitzvahs are meant to be lived. They're meant to be used as building blocks in life, building blocks for growth. They're meant to come from within. They're not something which we just read passively about. If we read passively, we passively receive the information, we haven't achieved anything. To reach the level of understanding the power of what it means to come together for ultimate mitzvahs that we can do together as a rabbim, those mitzvahs that we can only do together with each other, what he refers to as a chus tfilas rabbim, incredibly moving words. That comes from a perspective of each individual within that klal realizing and recognizing that they can build those blocks in life if they put the effort in. That is the mitzvah I think of Sippur Yetzias Mitzrayim. It is the mitzvah of Sippur that makes sense as to why the Seder night, Leil HaSeder, leaves out the blood on the mezuzahs and the mashkef, as we said, because that's the element which says self-growth, work on yourself, get up there on a ladder, get up there on a chair and put the blood on the mashkef yourself. And that is effectively, I think, the central message of this entire parsha, and something which hopefully will provide us guidance, not just for Parshas Bo, but hopefully a new approach to Seder night as well. Have a very good evening and a good Shabbos. Thank you for joining.
Shkoyach, Rabbi Birnbaum, could it be maybe that the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh is mentioned now the same reason, because of Chodesh Elochem?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, absolutely.
Zman kapora l'chol todosom, because growth. Could that be that's why it's now?
Absolutely, beautiful connection. It's introduced specifically here. The mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. Everyone asks, why here? We need it for the Yom Tov. Technically, there's a technical reason, but it's more because it's Kiddush HaChodesh al pi ha're'iyah, right? Through you have to do it yourselves. You're the one who you have to go ahead and do it yourself. Exactly. Thank you, Yossi. Okay.
Thank you very much. Beautiful share.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.